We're not wasting our time on your pathetic little promotion ceremony. The voice wasn't here. It was the memory from 48 hours ago bleeding through the static of a Thursday night football broadcast. The Cleveland Browns were blowing a third-quarter lead on the living room TV in Akron, Ohio. My father hadn't even bothered to look away from the screen when he said it. Pathetic. The memory dissolved into the harsh hum of industrial air conditioning. Fort Meade, Maryland. Present day. The main banquet hall smelled like industrial floor wax and burnt Folgers coffee that had been sitting on a hot plate since 0600. The air conditioning was cranked too high, blowing a steady recycled chill across the massive room. Around me, a sea of navy dress whites. Dozens of officers, dozens of families, wives fixing ties, husbands holding toddlers, flashbulbs popping. The dull, steady roar of civilian pride. I didn't look at them. My eyes were locked dead ahead. Row 3, aisle seats, 2 plastic folding chairs, empty. The gap in the crowd was blinding. It wasn't just that they didn't show up. It was the absolute void of their existence in a room meant to celebrate 18 years of my blood, sweat, and shattered cartilage. 18 years. 3 deployments. Pieces of jagged shrapnel still floating near my left calf. None of it meant a damn thing compared to a blown lead by the Browns or my brother's latest bogus startup company. To them, I was just Sophie, the old maid, the ATM. My black leather Oxford scuffed against the linoleum, a dark, ugly streak on a pristine floor. Attention to orders. The PA system cracked. The room snapped to attention. I locked my knees, a habit I had to consciously break so I wouldn't pass out under the harsh fluorescent lights. Shoulders back, chin parallel to the deck. Captain Ruiz stopped in front of me. He was a man built like a cinder block, a career intelligence officer who had seen more dark ops than sunlight. His dark eyes flicked over my right shoulder. He saw the empty chairs, a millimeter of a flinch in his jaw. That was it. He didn't offer a sad smile. He didn't ask where my people were. Pity is a civilian luxury. Ruiz knew better. He reached up. The metal pins of the silver oak leaf caught the glare of the room. Click, snap. The cold metal pierced the collar of my uniform. A commander in the United States Navy. Cyber Command. Top secret clearance. I held the keys to digital Armageddon. Yet my own mother couldn't be bothered to miss her Tuesday morning bingo game to see it. Looking sharp, Adams, Ruiz muttered, his voice barely carrying over the ambient noise of the hall. I shifted my gaze past his shoulder. Standing in the far back, leaning heavily on a scarred wooden cane, was Hank. 72 years old. Retired Marine Corps Master Sergeant. My neighbor. He wore a faded VFW jacket over a plaid flannel shirt, looking entirely out of place among the tailored suits and dresses. He caught my eye. He didn't smile. He just gave a single, slow nod. Strangers. The only people who actually knew what it cost me to survive. The ceremony broke. The room devolved into a cocktail hour I had zero intention of attending. Families swarmed their newly promoted officers. Laughter echoed off the cinder block walls. Ruiz stepped to my side near the punch bowl. He held a plastic cup of ice water, staring out at the mingling crowd. "You earned this rank, Adams," he said. His voice was low, gravelly. It wasn't a compliment. It was a statement of fact. Every brutal minute of it. My chest tightened. A sudden violent spike in my heart rate. The lump in my throat felt like a golf ball made of razor blades. 18 years in uniform teaches you how to apply a tourniquet under enemy fire. It teaches you how to compartmentalize the smell of burning diesel and copper blood in the dirt. It doesn't teach you how to patch a wound inflicted by the people who gave you your name. Inhale for 4 seconds. Hold for 4. Exhale for 4. Hold for 4. Box breathing. Tactical respiration. I forced my heart rate down. I tightened my core, turning the muscles of my abdomen into a brick wall. Lock it down. Shut it off. Absolutely clear, sir, I replied. My voice was flat, emotionless. A perfectly executed command response. Ruiz looked at me. He really looked at me, taking a slow sip of his water. He knew. You don't get eagles on your collar without learning how to read the dead space in a person's eyes. Go home, Commander, he he said softly. The war's not in this room. 40 minutes later. The heavy steel door of the hall shut behind me, cutting off the applause and the chatter. The Maryland heat hit me like a wet towel. I walked across the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. The sun beat down, turning the blacktop into a skillet. My shadow stretched out in front of me, long, sharp, alone. I unlocked my Honda Accord. The hinges groaned as I pulled the door open. I slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. The air inside the car was stale and sweltering. I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, gripping the cheap plastic steering wheel until my knuckles turned a bruised shade of white. The leather seat burned through the fabric of my trousers. I reached up to my collar. My thumb traced the hard, jagged edge of the new silver rank. It was pristine, cold, heavy. I pulled my iPhone from my pocket. The screen flared to life, casting a harsh blue glow over my face in the dimming light of the shaded parking structure. I opened the contacts, scrolled past the admirals, the secure lines, the Pentagon extensions. Stopped. Mom. I stared at the name. My thumb hovered over the glass screen. I thought about the sigh she always let out when I called. That heavy put-upon exhale that said, "What do you want now?" "Sophie, I'm busy cleaning up Danny's mess. Don't upset your father. In war, you don't waste ammo on a target that yields no tactical advantage. You cut the dead weight. You secure the perimeter. A liability is a liability even if they share your DNA." One blink. My thumb pressed down. Delete contact. A prompt popped up on the screen, a final warning. "Are you sure?" "Yes." The name vanished, just a blank space on a glowing screen. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. I finally turned the ignition. The engine roared to life, the AC blasting hot air into my face before turning freezing cold. I shifted into drive and pulled out of the lot. No looking in the rearview mirror. No ghosts. Just the road ahead, waiting for the inevitable moment the enemy would try to breach the wire again. 6 weeks later. A camera shutter clicked in a crowded briefing room at the Pentagon. I wasn't the subject. I was just background noise. A commander standing 3 paces behind a 3-star admiral holding a leather-bound briefing folder. That was it. A blurry profile in dress khaki on page 4 of the Washington Post. In D.C., it was nothing. A piece of paper destined for the recycling bin. In Akron, Ohio, it was a cruise missile. The iPhone on my nightstand went off at 0200 hours, Eastern Standard Time. I didn't groan. I didn't roll over. My eyes snapped open in the pitch dark. My spine locked rigid against the mattress, the muscle memory of a dozen combat deployments hijacking my nervous system. A 2 a.m. phone call means one of 2 things. Someone is in a body bag, or a secure server farm in Virginia just got breached by a foreign state. I grabbed the phone. The harsh blue light hit my retinas, casting long, sharp shadows across the bedroom wall. Incoming call 330 in sake. Area code. I stared at the digits. I had deleted the contact 6 weeks ago in that sweltering parking lot at Fort Meade. But I knew the number. I had it memorized since I was 7 years old. I swiped the green icon, pressed the cold glass to my ear. Adams. A flat, gravelly bark. "Oh, sweetie, did I wake you?" My jaw clenched so hard the molars ground together. The voice coming through the receiver was dripping with cheap artificial sweetener. It was a tone she reserved for neighborhood bake sales and church fundraisers. The voice of a woman playing the role of a doting mother for an invisible audience. "It's 2 a.m, I said. I know, but your father and I were just so excited." I didn't ask why. You don't hand the interrogator the rope. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My bare feet hit the freezing hardwood floor. "The ladies at St. Bernadette's haven't stopped talking about it." She rambled on, the words spilling out in a breathless rush. "Brenda saw the paper yesterday. The Washington Post. Can you imagine our little Sophie right there next to the big brass?" I reached down and traced the thick knotted scar on my left knee. The ruined cartilage clicked, a heavy dull sound in the quiet room as I bent the joint. "Your father went down to O'Malley's pub," she continued. "Bought a round of beers for the whole bar. He printed the picture out, Sophie. Had it laminated. Took it to church, too. He's telling everyone who will listen about his daughter at the Pentagon. My stomach turned. A cold, heavy knot of pure disgust formed just under my ribs. This was the same man who hadn't bothered to look away from a football game to acknowledge my promotion. The man who called 18 years of blood, sweat, and absolute sacrifice pathetic. But a blurry photograph next to a flag officer in a national paper, that was currency. That was social capital in a dying Rust Belt town where his own hardware store went bankrupt in 2008. He was wearing my uniform like a stolen valor Halloween costume, using my rank to scrub away the stench of his own mediocre existence. They didn't give a damn about the work. They didn't care about the top secret clearance, the sleepless nights, or the fact that my signature authorized millions in defense spending. They didn't care if I caught a bullet. They just wanted the neighbors to think they bred a winner. "That's nice," I said. 2 words, a brick wall. "Danny is so proud of you too," she added, her voice pitched up half an octave. A tell, a massive glaring behavioral tell. I stopped rubbing my knee. The air in my bedroom suddenly felt dead. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. "Is he?" I said. Not a question. "Oh, absolutely. You know how much he looks up to you." A laugh caught in my throat, dry and hard like crushed glass. Danny was 39. He smelled like cheap rye whiskey by noon and had tanked 3 separate LLCs in the last 5 years. He left a trail of unpaid contractors and maxed out credit cards wherever he walked. He looked up to anyone who could co-sign a loan. "I have an early briefing. Good night." I hung up before she could squeeze out another fake pleasantry. I tossed the phone onto the rumpled sheets. The screen went black. I didn't go back to sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, regulating my breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The recon mission was over. The enemy was shifting tactics. 3 days later, my office at Fort Meade, windowless, soundproof walls, a reinforced steel door. The low, steady hum of encrypted servers vibrating through the thick rubber soles of my boots. I sat behind a heavy metal desk, staring at a stack of classified cybersecurity contracting reports. Real threats. Real money. My personal phone buzzed against the metal edge of the desk. The sound was sharp, angry. The screen lit up. A text message, an unknown number, but the area code was 330. Akron again. "Hey Soph, it's Danny. Got a new phone. Listen, I need a small favor. Just some business advice? Call me when you have a minute." I leaned back in my chair. The heavy leather creaked under my weight. Business advice. Danny didn't want advice. Danny couldn't spell the word. Danny wanted a bailout. He wanted a patsy. Every time he burned through my parents' retirement money, every time the repo men came looking for his leased truck, he went looking for a new well to tap. But he had never come to me before. I was the old maid, the outcast, the woman who couldn't keep a husband. Until page 4 of the Washington Post, now I was a commander at the Pentagon, a shiny object with federal backing, a potential asset. I picked up the phone. The metal casing felt cold against my palm. I didn't type a reply. I just stared at the glowing black text on the white bubble. In combat, there is a distinct shift in the atmosphere right before things go to hell. It's a sudden drop in barometric pressure. It's the abrupt absence of birds singing in the trees. It is a quiet so absolute it makes your eardrums throb. When an enemy who has treated you like dirt your entire life suddenly smiles, offers a compliment, and asks for a favor, they aren't burying the hatchet. They are checking the wind direction. They are calculating the distance. I clicked the screen off and shoved the phone face down into my top desk drawer. I slammed the drawer shut. I didn't feel angry. I felt something much colder, much sharper. My nostrils flared involuntarily. There was no cordite in this sterile, air-conditioned federal building. No diesel fumes, no dirt. But I could smell it anyway. The bitter metallic stench of invisible gunpowder drifting through the vents. The artillery was dialed in, and the coordinates were aimed right at my back. The red phone didn't ring. It shrieked, a high-pitched, abrasive wail that cut through the low hum of the secure server room at Fort Meade. The red line. The one that bypassed secretaries' filters and standard operating procedures. The one that meant the sky was falling. I picked up the receiver. "Adams." "Commander." The voice on the other end was a block of dry ice. Special Agent Warren. Defense Criminal Investigative Service. DCIS didn't call to ask about your weekend. They called when federal prisons were involved. Agent Warren, what's the situation? I'm sending an encrypted file to your secure terminal now. Password is your DOD ID number. Open it. I leaned forward. My heavy tactical boots squeaked against the rubberized floor mat. I typed the 10-digit code. The screen flashed black, then rendered a 30-page PDF. I'm looking at it, I said. Page 4, bottom right corner. I scrolled. My breath caught in my throat. Just for a microsecond, but it caught. It was a contract. A supply bid for structural steel brackets and marine-grade epoxy. $3.2 million. Awarded to a vendor I had never heard of, Adams Marine Supply, LLC. But that wasn't what stopped my heart. At the bottom of the page, under the section marked Naval Oversight and Authorization, was a signature. A jagged, familiar scrawl in blue ink. Sophia Adams, Commander, U.S. Cybercom. Underneath the signature was a photocopy of my Department of Defense identification card. The same picture from the Washington Post clipping, cropped and attached as proof of federal backing. My shoulder blades hit the wood-paneled wall behind my desk. A hard, solid thud. The air in the room suddenly felt thin. I couldn't pull enough oxygen into my lungs. DCIS raided a warehouse in Akron, Ohio 3 hours ago. Warren's voice droned on, devoid of any human empathy. They found a desk, a laptop, and zero inventory. The address traces back to a Daniel Adams, your brother. My fingers dug into the edge of the metal desk. The steel bit into my skin. I have no knowledge of this company, Agent Warren. I assume not, Commander. The signature is a digital forgery. Sloppy work, cut and pasted from a public requisition form you signed last year. But that's not the problem. Then what is? The problem is that he used your rank to bypass the initial vetting process. He leveraged a top-secret clearance holder to steal taxpayer money. By standard procedure, the Navy Legal Office is opening an internal security review on you, effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical blow. A boot to the chest. An internal security review. They were going to pull my clearance. If you lose a top-secret SCI clearance at Cyber Command, you don't get demoted. You cease to exist. They take your badge. They take your gun. They march you out the front gate, and you never come back. 18 years of bleeding for this uniform, wiped out by a deadbeat who smelled like stale rye whiskey and bad decisions. Understood, I said. The word tasted like copper. You are under a strict gag order. Do not contact Daniel Adams. Do not alert the family. We are auditing his financials to see where the money moved. If we find out you tipped him off, you're looking at obstruction of a federal investigation. Am I relieved of duty? Not yet. But you're grounded. No active operations until the review is complete. Warren out. The line went dead. I set the receiver down. Slowly, carefully. If I moved too fast, I was going to tear the desk bolted to the floor clean off its hinges. My brother didn't just steal money. He stole my identity. The same family that called my military career a pathetic waste of time had taken the very rank they despised and weaponized it to commit a federal felony. They didn't need me. They needed a shield. A human sandbag to stack against the IRS when the bill came due. That evening, I sat in the dim light of Captain Ruiz's living room. The house smelled of old books and expensive cigar smoke. Ruiz sat in a leather armchair across from me, a heavy crystal glass of scotch resting on his knee. He didn't look surprised. He didn't offer fake sympathy. I held a mug of black coffee. No sugar, no cream. My hand was shaking. A microscopic tremor in the wrist. I hated it. I locked my elbow against my ribs to force the tremor to stop. They suspended my access to the grid. I said, my voice low. Warren said it's a procedural review. We both know what that means. If the brass thinks there's even a 1% chance I knew about this, I'm done. Ruiz took a slow drag from his cigar. The ember glowed orange in the dark room. Adams, he rumbled. You spent 3 tours in the sandbox. You know the golden rule of a firefight. I stared at the black surface of my coffee. Keep your head down. Wrong. Ruiz leaned forward. The rule is identifying the actual threat. The most dangerous enemy on the battlefield isn't the guy screaming and pointing an AK-47 at you. You can see him. You can shoot him. He tapped the ash into a heavy brass tray. The most dangerous enemy is the one who suddenly smiles at you. The one who changes their pattern. Because they just realized you make a perfect human shield. The words were sharp, razor blades wrapped in smoke. Danny is so proud of you. My mother's voice echoed in my skull. I need a small favor, just some business advice. They didn't want advice. They knew the feds were closing in. They knew the audits were starting. Danny reached out because he was trying to establish a paper trail of communication. He was going to claim I was a silent partner. If the ship went down, he was going to make sure the Navy commander went down with him to soften the blow. Ruiz took a sip of his scotch. Warren told you not to tip him off. He didn't tell you to roll over and die. The tremor in my hand stopped. The fear was gone. The shock was gone. What replaced it was something cold, dark, and utterly familiar. The absolute sociopathic clarity of a predator establishing a kill zone. I set the coffee mug down on the coaster. I stood up. My spine snapped straight. Thank you for the coffee, sir. Ruiz didn't look up. He just raised his glass. Happy hunting, Commander. I walked out of his house. My boots struck the concrete driveway in a hard, rhythmic cadence. I drove back to my apartment. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked into the bedroom and dropped to one knee. I reached under the bed and grabbed the heavy nylon strap of my olive drab duffel bag. I dragged it out across the floor. The metal zipper rasped loudly in the silent room. I packed 3 pairs of civilian clothes, 1 pair of dress uniform trousers, the silver oak leaf pins. I opened my laptop. The glare of the screen was the only light in the room. I bypassed the military travel portals and went straight to a commercial airline site. Destination, Akron Canton Airport. Departure, 0600 hours. Weather warning, severe winter storm advisory. I clicked purchase. I wasn't going home for a family reunion. I wasn't going to yell or scream or demand an apology. I was going to step behind enemy lines. The rental Chevy Malibu crushed the gray salt-stained snow of the driveway. Akron looked exactly how I left it. Cold, bleak, suffocating. I killed the engine. The metal of the door handle was freezing through my leather gloves. I grabbed the olive drab duffel bag from the passenger seat, kicked the door shut, and walked up the cracked concrete path to the front porch. I didn't knock. I used the spare key hidden under the rusted planter box. The heavy front door swung open. A blast of dry radiator heat hit me in the face, carrying the smell of pot roast and Vanilla Glade plug-ins. It was the scent of manufactured domestic bliss, an ambush wrapped in suburban camouflage. Sophie, my mother appeared from the kitchen hallway. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, a wide, practiced smile plastered across her face. She practically lunged at me, throwing her arms around my shoulders in a tight embrace. I didn't hug back. My arms stayed pinned to my sides. The muscles in my back locked into solid granite. The hug was an optical illusion, a physical lie meant to disarm the target before the interrogation began. "Look who's here!" a voice boomed from the living room. My father stood up from his worn lazy boy recliner. He walked over, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder, and pressed a dry, scratchy kiss to my forehead. "The Pentagon's finest," he said loudly, like he was playing to a crowd that wasn't there. I didn't say a word. I just dropped my duffel bag by the coat rack. My eyes scanned the room, automatically cataloging the changes. The worn carpet, the pile of unopened mail on the side table, and there, sitting dead center on the glass coffee table, was the newspaper clipping. Page 4 of the Washington Post, carefully cut out and shoved into a cheap plastic discount store frame. It was a trophy. Not of my achievement, but of their perceived status. Footsteps thumped down the wooden stairs. Danny. He looked rough. 39 going on 50. His face was puffy, his eyes bloodshot, wearing a faded Ohio State hoodie that hung loose over his gut. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs, hands jammed deep in his pockets. The air in the room shifted. A sudden, heavy drop in atmospheric pressure. He didn't come in for a hug. He just hovered near the kitchen island. He poured himself a glass of tap water, but the smell coming off him was unmistakable. Bottom shelf rye whiskey. It seeped from his pores, thick and sour, fighting against the vanilla air freshener. Hey, Soph, he mumbled. Surprise visit. I had some leave to burn. I lied smoothly. A flat tactical response. He took a slow sip of his water. He wouldn't look me in the eye. That was the first tell. In interrogation training, they teach you to watch the eyes and the hands. Danny's hands were gripping the glass so hard his knuckles were white. His eyes darted everywhere but my face. So, Danny said, forcing a casual tone that sounded like sandpaper. How are things in DC? Lots of red tape, I bet. Paperwork, audits. He let the word audits hang in the air for a fraction of a second too long. I stood perfectly still. My posture was a plumb line against the sloppy, sagging energy of the room. The usual. My father moved to the kitchen island, standing slightly in front of Danny. A subconscious defensive formation. The patriarch shielding the golden child. Danny set the glass down. He let out a nervous, hacking cough. Hypothetically, if someone, say a contractor, maybe exaggerated a professional relationship on a bid sheet, what happens? Is it just a slap on the wrist? The room went dead silent. The pot roast stopped smelling like dinner and started smelling like a trap. I looked right through his bloodshot corneas. A forgery on a federal naval contract is a felony, Danny. My father slammed his hand flat on the faux granite countertop. The loud smack echoed in the kitchen. Nobody's perfect, Sophie. He barked, his face instantly flushing red. People make mistakes trying to get ahead. You wouldn't understand. You've had the government handing you a paycheck for almost 20 years. The toxic defense system activated flawlessly. Deflect, diminish, attack. Right, I said, one word, an ice pick. I picked up my duffel bag and walked past them, heading straight up the stairs to my old childhood bedroom. The mission parameters were confirmed. They knew I knew, and they were already circling the wagons to protect the liability. 3 hours later. Midnight. The house was dark. The heating system clanked and groaned in the walls. I hadn't taken off my boots. I sat on the edge of the twin bed, fully dressed, listening to the silence. I needed water. I opened the bedroom door. The hinges were silent. I had oiled them with WD-40 years ago, before I shipped out for basic training. I walked down the hall, stepping only on the edges of the floorboards where the wood didn't creak. Ghost walking. A habit born in hostile territory. I reached the top of the stairs. I froze. Voices? Low, urgent murmurs coming from the basement laundry room. I crept down the stairs, pressing my back against the drywall. I stopped near the open door leading down to the basement. The smell of mildew and damp concrete drifted up, carrying the hushed voices with it. She knows, Danny's voice cracked. Panic, high and thin. Did you see her face? The feds are probably already looking at my accounts. Calm down, my father hissed. She's your sister. She'll fix it. How? It's a forged DOD signature, Dad. It's federal. Then make her sign the damn forms for real, backdate them. Tell her to say she's a silent partner. She has the clearance, she can make it go away. A long, heavy pause. Then my mother's voice. Weak, hesitant. What if she refuses Frank? What if she won't cover for him? The silence that followed was the loudest sound I had ever heard in my life. I didn't breathe. My heart rate dropped to a slow, methodical thud against my ribs. What else does she have? My father sneered. The words were venomous, dripping with an absolute terrifying pragmatism. She's 37, divorced, no kids, no real family of her own. Her life is nothing but a uniform. If she won't take a bullet for her own flesh and blood, I'll ruin her. I'll tell the neighborhood, the church, everyone. I'll brand her a traitor to this house. I didn't flinch. I didn't gasp. No tears formed in the corners of my eyes. The nervous system simply shut off the human element. The final shred of daughterly hesitation died right there on the top step, murdered by the man who gave me half my DNA. They didn't want me to save Danny. They wanted to strip me for parts. They measured the worth of my life, 18 years of service, 3 combat deployments, a shattered knee by my marital status. I was empty, disposable. A human sandbag waiting to be stacked against the flood. I didn't go get a glass of water. I turned around, walked back up the stairs, stepping only on the edges of the floorboards, silent, invisible. 430 hours. The sky over Akron was pitch black, spitting freezing rain onto the windshield of the Chevy Malibu. I sat in the parking lot of a closed Dunkin' Donuts on the edge of town. The engine idled, pumping heat into the cabin. The harsh orange glow of a street lamp illuminated the interior of the car. I held a cheap styrofoam cup of black coffee in my left hand. My right hand held my cell phone. I typed a secure 10-digit number into the keypad. The line rang twice. "Warren!" The voice was alert, instantly awake. I took a slow sip of the scalding coffee. It burned my tongue, grounding me in the physical reality of the moment. "Agent Warren," I said. My voice was a flat line, zero static, zero hesitation. "It's Commander Adams." "Go ahead, Commander." I stared out through the windshield at the icy, desolate road. "I have visual confirmation. The target is aware of the audit, and they are attempting to coerce a federal officer into covering up a forgery." A pause on the other end. The sound of a keyboard clacking. "Are you ready to give a formal statement, Commander?" My thumb traced the edge of the styrofoam cup. I thought about the cheap plastic frame on the coffee table. I thought about the smell of rye whiskey and the absolute certainty in my father's voice when he called my life worthless. I set the cup down in the console. "I'm fully cooperating," I said, my eyes locking onto the dark horizon. Drop the net. 1600 hours. Sunday. The driveway was choked with cars. Ford F-150s, rusted-out sedans, and SUVs parked halfway onto the dead winter grass. I counted 12 vehicles. A pressure campaign. They didn't just invite the immediate family. They invited the neighbors, the church friends, the cousins. They packed the house with an audience betting on the oldest trick in the Midwest suburban playbook: keep the conflict buried to save face in front of the guests. They thought a crowded dining room would force me into compliance. They thought I would smile, eat the dry pot roast, and quietly sign my life away in the basement later to avoid a scene. They brought a plastic butter knife to a gunfight. I stood on the concrete porch. The icy wind bit at my exposed neck. I didn't wear a polite sweater. I didn't wear jeans. I wore navy dress blues. The heavy dark wool was pressed sharp enough to cut glass. The brass buttons gleamed. On my left breast, the ribbon racked 3 rows of authorized military decorations, campaign medals, and a purple heart sat perfectly aligned. I turned the knob and pushed the door open. The wall of noise hit me instantly. Laughter, clinking beer bottles, the roar of a football pre-game show on the television. The air in the house was thick, smelling of roasted pork yeast and cheap aerosol air freshener. Then someone noticed the uniform. The laughter died. The silence spread through the living room like a localized EMP blast. Necks turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The civilians stared at the dark wool, the gold stripes on the sleeves, the sheer unadulterated weight of federal authority standing in their cheap carpeted foyer. My mother froze near the kitchen island, holding a gravy boat. Her fake smile fractured. Danny was leaning against the refrigerator. He looked like he had slept in his clothes. He took one look at the silver oak leaves on my collar, and the blood drained out of his face. He knew. I didn't say a word. I took off my white cover, tucked it under my left arm, and walked into the dining room. My leather Oxford struck the laminate floor with a heavy rhythmic thud. They had set a place for me near the head of the table. I sat down. I kept my back perfectly straight, 2 inches of space between my spine and the wooden chair. The crowd slowly filtered into the dining room, nervously taking their seats. The energy was totally dead. Nobody knew what to say to the officer sitting rigid in the middle of a Sunday roast. My father tried to salvage the play. He stood up at the head of the table. His face was flushed tight with forced joviality. He picked up a sweaty pint glass of Miller Lite and grabbed a butter knife. Clink, clink, clink. "All right, everybody settle down," he boomed. He plastered on a grin, looking around the table at the neighbors. "I want to make a toast. We've got a celebrity in the house today. To my daughter Sophia, big shot at the Pentagon, securing the cyber, whatever it is she does. We couldn't be prouder." He raised his glass. A few people mumbled agreements and raised their water glasses. I didn't touch my drink. I picked up my stainless steel dinner fork. I held it for a microsecond. Then I set it down on the rim of the ceramic plate. Clack! The sound was sharp. A gunshot in a quiet room. I didn't look at the neighbors. I didn't look at my mother. I looked dead across the table at Danny. I reached inside the breast pocket of my uniform jacket. I pulled out a folded manila envelope. I tossed it onto the table. It slid across the gravy-stained tablecloth and hit the edge of Danny's plate. 3 weeks ago, I said. My voice was completely flat. Zero modulation. It carried through the silent room like a blade scraping over ice. I notified the Defense Criminal Investigative Service about the fraudulent procurement documents tied to Adams Marine Supply. The room shattered. Someone gasped. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Danny stared at the manila envelope like it was a live grenade. A thick layer of greasy sweat broke out on his forehead. He started to shake. "What?" he choked out. His voice cracked. He looked around the room, desperate, then back to me. "Soph, what the hell did you do? You ratted me out. You're my sister." The word hung in the air, pathetic and hollow. He didn't call me sister when he forged my signature. He didn't call me sister when he used my security clearance to steal $3 million of taxpayer money. He only remembered the biological connection when he needed a human shield to absorb the shrapnel. Because I bled for 18 years to build that career. I said, my voice dropping an octave, pressing down on him. I took shrapnel in my leg. I buried people who were better than anyone in this room, and this house treated it like garbage, until you needed a federal patsy to cover your scam. "Shut your mouth," my father roared. He slammed both fists down on the table. The silverware jumped. The neighbors recoiled, pressing themselves back into their chairs. His face was purple with rage. The mask was entirely gone. "You come into my house wearing that goddamn suit, and you humiliate your brother in front of our friends." He screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "You ungrateful, selfish bitch. You fix this. You call whoever you have to call, and you fix this right now." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just stared at the vein bulging in his neck. King Kung. The front doorbell chimed. 2 crisp electronic notes. In a normal house, it was the sound of a late guest. Today it was the sound of a firing squad racking their bolts. The color vanished from my father's face. He looked at the front door, then back at me. His jaw slacked. "I didn't come here to fix it," I said, my voice a quiet, lethal whisper. "I came to give them the coordinates for dinner." I stood up. The chair scraped back. I walked past the paralyzed neighbors, past my mother, who was now openly sobbing against the kitchen counter, and walked to the front door. I turned the deadbolt and pulled it open. The porch was swarming. 6 agents. Navy windbreakers with NCIS in bold yellow lettering across the back. 2 more wearing dark suits with IRS CID badges clipped to their belts. No drawn weapons, no dramatic shouting, just the cold crushing machinery of the federal government coming to collect its debt. "Commander Adams," the lead agent said, holding up a federal warrant. "He's in the dining room," I replied. I stepped out of the doorway, clearing the fatal funnel. The agents flooded into the house. The heavy thud of tactical boots swallowed the dining room. Chairs crashed to the floor. Danny started screaming, a high, pathetic wail of a coward finally backed into a corner. "Hands on the wall! Do it now!" an agent barked. The sharp metallic ratcheting of steel handcuffs echoed over the crying. My father shoved past an agent, his eyes wild. His chest heaving, he pointed a trembling finger at my face. "You ruined us!" he screamed over the chaos. "You dragged this family through the mud." I stood perfectly still on the porch. The icy wind whipped around my legs, but I didn't feel the cold. I looked at the man who had spent 37 years making me feel completely invisible. "No, Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the freezing air. "I brought the one thing no one in this house has the spine to face. The truth." I turned my back on the open door and walked out into the snow. 0400 hours. Interstate 77 South. The heater in the rental Chevy Malibu blew dry, stale air against my face. Outside the windshield, the Ohio state line disappeared in the rearview mirror. Good riddance. The tires hummed a steady, monotonous rhythm against the freezing asphalt. My iPhone sat in the center console. The screen flared to life in the pitch-black cabin. A single text message from Agent Warren at DCIS. "Target processed. Evidence secured." I didn't reply. I swiped the notification away. Underneath Warren's message sat a graveyard of red numbers. 62 missed calls. A dozen from my mother, the rest from Danny. Voicemails I would delete without ever listening to. People who watch movies think revenge feels like a cold beer on a hot summer day. It doesn't. Calling in a federal airstrike on your own bloodline doesn't leave you popping champagne. It leaves a massive echoing crater in your chest. The fallout was entirely clinical. Danny took a plea deal 2 weeks later to avoid a lengthy public trial. 36 months in a federal penitentiary in Pennsylvania. My father didn't show up to his sentencing hearing. He parked himself on a cracked vinyl bar stool at O'Malley's pub and drowned his shame in cheap draft beer, telling anyone who'd listen how the deep state government set his boy up. January hit Virginia hard. The wind whipping off the Potomac River was brutal, cutting through heavy coats like a serrated knife. I unpacked the last brown cardboard box in my new apartment in Alexandria. 4th floor, exposed brick walls, hardwood floors that didn't creak when you walked on them. I bought a $15 snake plant from a local hardware store and set the plastic pot on the windowsill. The iron radiator hissed in the corner. I poured a heavy ceramic mug of black drip coffee and stood by the cold glass. A single pale beam of winter sunlight pushed through the gray clouds and caught the edge of the thick green leaves. I took a sip. The coffee was bitter, scalding my tongue. Perfect. I looked around the empty living room. It wasn't just a house, it was a secured perimeter. Every object, every shadow, every cubic inch of oxygen in this space belonged entirely to me. Nobody got past the heavy deadbolt without my direct authorization. For the first time in 37 years, my central nervous system powered down. The constant low-grade hum of anticipating a psychological ambush faded into absolute stunning silence. I put a jacket on and took a walk down the block. The freezing air stung the inside of my lungs. Hank was sitting on his front porch. The 72-year-old Marine had a thick wool blanket draped over his knees. His scarred wooden cane leaned against the aluminum siding of the house. He held an insulated travel mug that smelled heavily of black tea and cheap Kentucky bourbon. I walked up the concrete steps. I didn't give him a sanitized, polite version of the story. I gave him the tactical debrief, the forged signatures, the basement conversation, the NCIS raid in the middle of a Sunday roast. Hank didn't interrupt. He didn't gasp. He just stared out at the bare shivering oak trees lining the street. His jaw worked slowly, chewing on the information. Danny's doing 3 years, I said, my voice dead flat. My father won't speak my name. My mother thinks I'm a monster. I waited for the judgment. The standard civilian platitudes. But they're your family. Blood is thicker than water. You have to forgive them. Hank didn't say any of that garbage. He reached out and gripped the curved handle of his cane. His knuckles were swollen thick with arthritis and old fistfights. Commander, he rasped his voice, sounding like heavy boots grinding on gravel. Doing the noble thing. It usually hurts like hell. The word hit my chest like a physical blow. Noble, not selfish, not pathetic, not a traitor, noble. The steel vault inside my ribs cracked. Just a microscopic hairline fracture, but it was enough. My vision suddenly blurred. 18 years of compartmentalized trauma. The tearing pain of the shrapnel in my calf. The missed holidays. The absolute crushing weight of holding the line for people who despised my very existence. The tears spilled over my lower lashes, hot and fast. They tracked down my freezing cheeks, leaving trails of fire on my skin. I didn't wipe them away. I didn't do a box breathing exercise to suppress my heart rate. I just stood there and let it happen. Hank didn't offer me a tissue. He didn't reach out to pat my shoulder. He didn't look at me with pity. He simply turned his head, staring deliberately down the empty street, giving a fellow Marine the ultimate dignity of bleeding out in private. Spring thawed the ice on the Potomac. I sat at my kitchen counter and wrote my mother a letter. 3 pages of standard white printer paper. I didn't yell. I didn't list her crimes or demand an apology she was incapable of giving. I drafted a treaty establishing a demilitarized zone. No phone calls, no holiday drop-ins. No emergency financial requests. A permanent cessation of hostilities through total separation. I folded the pages, sealed the envelope, and dropped it in a blue USPS mailbox on the corner. Target neutralized. October rolled in. The air turned crisp, smelling of wood smoke and crushed fallen leaves. I was walking down the cobblestone sidewalks of King Street in Old Town Alexandria. I wore faded jeans, a heavy leather jacket, and comfortable boots. The old shrapnel wound in my left leg was acting up from the dropping temperature, giving me a slight limp, but I didn't care. I passed the outdoor patio of a brick-walled pub. A table of 4 women sat near the iron railing. Short haircuts, worn canvas jackets. One of them had a faded 10th Mountain Division patch sewn onto the strap of her duffel bag. They were laughing. Loud, unpolished, real laughter. The kind of raw noise you only hear in a mess hall or a forward operating base. The woman with the patch caught my eye. She stopped talking. She looked at my posture, the perfectly straight back, the calculated sweep of my eyes tracking the exits of the street. She knew. You can't wash the uniform off a lifer. She didn't smile. She just raised her heavy pint glass of dark stout, holding it up in a silent, dead serious salute. The other 3 women noticed her gaze. They turned, looked at me, and raised their glasses too. 4 complete strangers. 4 sisters. I stopped on the sidewalk. I didn't snap a salute back. I just smiled. A real, genuine smile that actually reached the corners of my eyes. The war in Akron was over. I realized the final tactical truth of my career right there on the pavement. The bravest thing a soldier can do isn't standing in front of a firing squad of people who share your blood. It's turning your back on their toxic battlefield, walking away and letting them shoot each other. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, drop a comment below to share your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.